Imagine being 15 years old, moving to another country, leaving your mother, your father, your siblings, everything that you know behind. You have your first child at 15, your second one at 19, your third one by 20, and by 28 you have 5 children. That is something that you don't hear of these days as often. But a few years back, that's something that happened a lot. Good evening, Toastmasters, fellow Toastmasters, and distinguished guests. The story that I'm about to tell is the story of my mother. About 2 years ago, I found out that I was going to become a grandmother. So a lot of emotions came up, a lot of things I've been wanting to stop from moving from generation to generation, but I never really knew what my mother had gone through. So in a few moments, I'm going to tell you a little bit about her life. My mother immigrated to the United States at the age of 15, like I mentioned, with my father just being 19. But in order for me to be able to know more about my background, since I've been doing more self-discovery, I've been doing more things to be able to know what my ancestors were like, how I am bringing these generations to my daughters now that I have 2 daughters. So one day I had to talk to my mother and sit down, because as Mexican, or like as Hispanics, we don't really talk about our past. We just go along with life and not really knowing what you yourself bring to your life and your family and your next generations. So I sat with my mother one day when I found out that I was going to be a grandmother myself, and we went over like her past. She started telling me about how she was raised with my great grandmother, which is her grandmother, at a very young age. My grandmother raised 10 children of her own and was able to bring her in also. So she pretty much grew up with her uncles. My grandmother was one of a kind. She married also at very young age. Back in the days, you were able to marry at 12 to 13 years old. Right now, that to me was baffling. It's just something that it's hard to comprehend. You know, my grandma was a hard worker. She labored physically and emotionally because she raised her 9 children pretty much on her own. Unfortunately, her love department was not a good one, since her first husband passed away like in the Mexican Revolution. 2 of her husbands left her to come to the United States. Her 4th husband, since she married 4 times, he passed away from health conditions. But my grandmother was a very fierce woman, and she loved to motivate her children and wanted them to have an education. So she ended up pushing her children to be able to become successful. So out of her 9 children, 5 became successful. They had degrees, and they ended up going to the government politics. One of her sons even ran for president of Mexico at one point. To me, knowing that actually opened up my eyes to a lot of things. But I knew that there were cycles that had to be broken. But I was able to understand my mother's raising. She started telling me a little bit more about her own mother. Her own mother was a very willed person, and she was a very loving person. But she also had 10 children of her own that she raised. She actually had 13, but only 10 survived. So she ended up with 4 women and 4 boys. My mom was the oldest. So now I'm starting to understand where the patterns are, how generations, you bring your own traumas to your next generation. So I wanted to put a stop to that, but I needed to know my mother a little bit more. My mother is a very loving woman, but she did come here at a very young age, not knowing anybody, pretty much just living with one of our relatives that came before they did. But it was something that I never really knew her struggle. I have a loving mom. I thank God that she is still with me. I'm grateful for still having her with me. And I'm trying to learn more things from her so I'm able to either break cycles or bring new things to my own family. I want to talk a little bit about my mother. She raised 6 children of her. She raised 6 children, 5 of her own, and 1 which is my cousin. But she raised him since he was born, so he is my brother. So she said, we always say that she raised 6 children. She always was a housewife. She was never able to work. She was always there for us. I already thought my upbringing has been very loving. I've always thought that it was a perfect, or it's a good childhood. I never saw anything bad about it. I never felt anything. My mother was always there for us. She cooked for us. She cleaned for us. She picked us up from school. She was always there. So for me, that was something that I felt like I had a great childhood. But as I grew older and I brought patterns to my own family and my own children, I realized that there was something missing that I didn't understand, which was the affection of a mother. She was there loving us in her own way, but I never heard any type of positive affirmation from my mother. I never remember her hugging me. I never remember holding me. And the same with my father. You know, I've learned to understand that it wasn't because she didn't want to or because she didn't know how to. It's just because she wasn't raised that way. She grew up in different environments. She grew up with a lot of people. I was the second oldest of 6 of us. So for me to be able to understand, I knew that she had other kids to take care of. So now I'm able to see that. Right now, she was always there for us in her own way. And I know that I wanted to break those cycles. Once I found out that I was going to become a grandmother, I wanted to be able to just break that routine and break those cycles. I want to be able to show that to my daughters and my grandson, because I know that I've struggled with that for a very long time. I'm not a very affectionate person, but I'm really working on it. I have been working on it for a while. So every time that I show them that I love them, whether it's motivating them, telling them they could do it, trying to hug them. It hasn't been easy. It's not an easy thing when you're not raised that way. But my thing is, I need to break those cycles. Every time that I think about my past, especially this topic of childhood memories, it brought me to all this nostalgia of having to think about my childhood. And unfortunately, I don't recall a lot of it. And I don't know if it's because maybe I blocked it out, or I'm not sure why, but talking to my mother and being able to understand where she came from and where I was going and where I wanted to go, I was able to start making changes. So it hit me. So I had to be able to do some changes. So I recommend, like, if you have never done anything like that, look into your past, look into your family, so that you're able to understand why sometimes we bring generations, pretty much generations of, like, it's either like traumas or little things that you really don't think about. But if you put everything together, if you start working on it, you'll be able to understand where you want to go in the future. And if you want to break those cycles, then it's something that you already know what to do. So, or you could work on for the next generation. That is it. Thank you.